Got it.
All right, okay, first I thought we'd do the Omnipresent God. I know I have been bringing some things up that are like, huh? What's he talking about? You know, when the Lord told Moses, the I am that I am has sent you. Remember when Moses, and that's kind of a hard concept to get a hold of. What is God talking about when he said, I am that I am? I contend that he's talking about I am in the past, I am in the present, and I am in the future. All at the same time. All at the same time. That's the key. He is in our future. He is in our past. All at the same time. And I thought, Lord, is there any other passages that kind of give us some hints that kind of... So I listed down a few things, and I may find during my studies other things, and I'll bring them later on. But I thought these here are pretty interesting, especially the fourth one. So let's look at the very first one on our omnipresent God. Exodus chapter 3, verse 14, it says, And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thus shall you say unto the children of Israel, I am has sent me unto you. Or has sent me unto you. So the I am, he was supposed to go and tell the children of Israel that the I am has sent me. Okay, can I get some person to donate one of them? Vicki doesn't have this one.
Share.
You can share.
Yeah.
Vicki. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, she doesn't need that.
By the way, this is Vicki Campbell, and
Hi, Vicki.
this is
Hi.
Cal and Carol, and I think you know the rest of them. Yeah, so it said, not, if you take a look at your paper, not I was, not I will be, but I am. All time is in the present with our God. That is a hard concept for us in this time period to understand. That in God's world, that's a bad word, but in God's area, God's domain, that's a better word. In God's domain, everything is present. It's not we're going to get to the future. He sees it. He sees it in such clarity. It is actually in His present. And we are in this time-generated thing that we can't concept that, because as children we're taught, when 8 o'clock comes around, we're going to get the bottle, and 9:30 we're going to get our diapers changed, and we start this dark light, dark light, dark light, and we struggle at understanding how can everything be present, because I think of things in the future and I think of things in the past, but God says I am that I am. Okay, let's look at a couple of other things that I think God gives us other instances in the scriptures that we can kind of chew over. Let's go to this next one. John chapter 1, verse 48 and 49. Remember, Nathanael is going to be one of the apostles. And Nathanael said to Jesus, he said to him, Whence knowest thou me? Because Jesus came to him and said to follow him. He says, How do you know me? Nathanael says. Jesus answered and said unto him, Before that fellow called thee, when thou wast under the fig tree, I saw thee. And Nathanael answered and said unto him, Rabbi, thou art the Son of God. Thou art the King of Israel. Now, Nathanael, when he heard that Jesus seen him under the fig tree, he knew that had to be God. Now, why? Because wherever Nathanael was, it was a secret place that other people couldn't see. Or Jesus was someplace else. So when he heard Jesus say, I seen you under the fig tree, Nathanael was communicating with God under the fig tree. And at that point, he says, this must be God. Because when I was under the fig tree, the only one that would have seen me would have been God. Now, Jesus wasn't in the location of the fig tree. And how do we know that? Because Nathanael says, "You must be God." If he was standing right next to the fig tree, he would have said, "Oh yeah, I see him. He was looking at the fig tree." Or if he was, but he must have been in a secretive place where no one could see except God. And Jesus would have been in a different place, in Galilee perhaps, or some other area. But he's seen Nathanael interacting with God under the fig tree. Isn't that amazing? Now that's something you really got to chew on. You got to say, "Hey, boy, that's." I think God gives us a little touchstones here and there to help us to understand this concept. Let's go on to the next one. And it says, see also Jesus time travel in John chapter 6, verse 21. Time travel. Remember the guy on the news? What was the guy that had the time machine? That comedian guy, and they got in the time machine and they went to different time. I can't think what. Anyways, this is time travel. Back to the future. Oh. Remember? Yeah, Back to the future. Okay. I'm going to read. Then they willingly received him into the ship. That they were having a storm. Jesus is walking on the water. He comes up to the ship, and then they willingly received him into the ship, and immediately the ship was at the land whither they went. We read the context, and we'll find out that it was in the middle of the Galilee, of Lake. What did I say? Galilee. Lake. Anyways, Lake Galilee. They were in the middle of that lake. So I'm trying to think of the Sea of Galilee. Why am I saying lake? The Sea of Galilee. It's a Freudian thing. So they were in the middle of it. It's like 5 miles wide, and it says in the few verses before that, and they're in the midst of it. So they're in the middle, and there's like 2.5 miles away. As soon as Jesus gets in the boat is transported immediately to the other shore. I go, huh? And you know what? That is in every one of the Gospels. So that must be significant, because there's other miracles that Jesus did that weren't in every Gospel. But this was. So Jesus transported a ship with other people to a different location without them seeing that ship going 400 miles an hour through the water, getting over to the other shore, or being a flash of light. So Jesus transported them through time and space to get them to the other side in an instant. That would have been, whoa. How many of you have been fishing now? Stuart, I know you've been fishing, but out there on the boat, Junior. And, can you imagine that all of a sudden you're in the middle of the lake and then boom, you're on the other side? God transported them instantly through time and space to another location. You kind of got to go, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Kind of like, it gets better. It gets better. We're moving on. Chew on that one for a while. Are you ready? Revelation chapter 14, verse 10. And if you got a handle on this one, if you can tell me about this, this is how great our God is. Revelation chapter 14, 10. The same shall drink, talking about the people that are following the Antichrist, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without measure into the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Huh? You're telling me that the lost will be tormented in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb? That's what it's saying, isn't it? I mean, is that English not correct? That's what he's saying. And I thought, well, maybe it's just the King James. I went to the ESV, the NIV, the NASB. Every one of them is the same. in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb. And who is the Lamb? Jesus. In the presence of Jesus, they will be tormented with fire and brimstone. And what's that? What we're talking fire and brimstone and tormenting, what are we talking about? Hell. Jesus will be present everywhere, even in the presence of those that are in torture in hell. That's not saying Jesus. I'm not saying Jesus is being tortured in hell, but he's there. You can go no place that he is not at. Isn't that's kind of like, I don't understand this, Lord. It doesn't make sense. But that's what it says. So our God looks at our present, our past, and our future all as one kaleidoscope. It's one great big picture. And he's given us a couple things in the scriptures to kind of show us this, because how could God be in the presence? The word presence is used in all the different translations. And it means in the location of, the locality of those that are tortured in fire and brimstone. He is in the presence. Oh, if I had seen you guys individually, one to say, guess what? Jesus is going to be in hell with those that are going to be crying in the fire. You'd have said, you're crazy, Clyde. I would have had to read the Bible verse and say, don't stone me yet. Take a look at it. Isn't that interesting? Now, what does that do for me? That should expand me to begin to see that our God is a lot bigger than what we think. He's not something that, is in the past, in the present, and in the future. He's not going to be in the future. I know when we're reading the scripture and it says such and such happened and such is going to happen, we say, oh, well, God will be there in the future when this happens. But in God's kaleidoscope of eternity, he sees everything as present. Wow. That's heavy. That's heavy. And that should help us a lot as we do our Bible studies and stuff, and just to remember how big our God is. When we say he's omnipresent, he's sovereign, he's omnipotent, when we say that kind of stuff, a lot of times in our mind we limit that. But he is more than that. He is to the point that he's actually in the place where their fire and brimstone is.
Question, Clyde.
Yes, ma'am.
Hell is where Satan is put in for the 1,000 years. Is this talking about hell, or is this talking about the final judgment of fire and brimstone?
Good question. It doesn't say. It just says that those that worship the Antichrist, that's the context of what he's talking about, they will be thrown into a place where fire and brimstone. Now, she brings up that point. Does that mean hell, or does that mean the lake of fire? There's actually two different places. Remember that. And the lake of fire is a permanent place. The hell is a temporary jail before you get sent to the penitentiary, which is the lake of fire. That's where death and hell are thrown into the lake of fire, it says in Revelation. So when we find what she's saying, is this going to be, I don't know. But it is a place where fire and brimstone are. And Jesus is in the presence of them. Wow.
It can't hurt him.
No, it can't hurt him. He went through with the three children of Israel back with Babylon, when Nebuchadnezzar threw the three children of Israel into the fire, and they've seen the fourth man in there. But this is like, it's gonna, I find it hard to grasp. Am I the only one? I find it hard to
I
grasp.
could see the angels being there, keeping it just like the Garden of Eden, that they, you know, I can see the angels being there and keeping, you know, but
Right, almost like
it's
a
hard
person
to.
in the garden.
Yeah, I know, it's, so anyways, let's go on, Psalms 139, verse 7. It says, where shall I go from thy spirit? Or whither shall I flee from thy presence? God is everywhere, even in our future, even in hell. We can't go anywhere that he's not there. That's what that verse is talking about. And I'm sorry, but I got to give you the truth. That's what I see. That's what I see. The key passage is Matthew 22:29. Jesus answered and said unto the, he's talking to the Spirit or the Sadducees here, ye do err, not knowing the scriptures nor the power of God. We need to be careful we don't err, not knowing the power of our God. Sometimes with the corruption in government and everything, and we throw up our hands and we say, oh man, we do err because we don't know the power of our God. He can change things instantly. Okay? Any questions, comments about that? B or Phil?
Do you know why we don't know the power of our God? It's because we don't fellowship with him. Read his word.
Oh.
Understand who God really is and what he can do
Yeah.
beyond our comprehension.
Absolutely. She used that word fellowship. We don't fellowship with God. First John.
I think the word she's thinking of is meditate.
Yeah, you have to meditate. That's another
So
word,
when
yeah.
because do you read through
Yeah.
it, and do you actually sit and meditate?
Yeah, and let him talk. If he doesn't talk to you, you know, but that verse says, you do err. He told the Sadducees, you do err because you don't know the scriptures and you don't know the power of God. The Sadducees would have said, we know the scriptures. What are you talking about? We studied the scriptures since we were children. We understood. We know the scriptures. And they didn't know the power of God. They denied there was a resurrection. And they didn't know the scripture, and they didn't know the power of God. You know, someday your dead body is going to be resurrected. That's not a pie in the sky here by and by. That's a reality. That's a very clear reality. Ron?
I think, being under the preaching of God's word, the word meditate has actually been coming up a lot. And I can see just over the past of my life, I used to just read. I didn't meditate. Now I'm understanding more. Now you don't just read and you gotta sit and ponder.
The ponder. Ponder's a good word too.
And
Yeah.
that's what the Lord has really started,
Yeah.
trying to teach me now, memorizing his word
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that was what she said about,
Yeah, Paul said to Timothy, study to show yourself approved unto God. If we don't study, we are not what? Study to show yourself approved. If you don't study, you're not what? Approved. Approved. God will not approve of our life if we don't study. And is there anything, Einstein, they came to him and they said, why is it you're so smart and why do you know all this stuff and everything? And he says, well, there isn't anything that the human mind will not do to avoid the arduous task of thinking. Yeah, that's what it is. We really don't want to study. You know, when your kids came home from school and they said, oh, they want me to study this. You know, does anybody have any kids that came home from school that said, I get to study this? Anybody have any kids like? You did?
Not my kid.
Yeah, your
I've been
kid.
in school for 20 years, so I think I can say to I was like that.
Yeah, you was like that? Well, that's because you went back and paid for it, and you found out you had to get a good grade because of it. Okay, now.
I have one thing, Mike.
You can turn, we're done with that. Thank you.
I ran across something interesting